as a teacher, I am really taking the time to understand my students. It's important that I know what languages they speak at home, maybe even know a little bit about their culture, so that way when I'm reading their writing and I'm identifying concerns that I have, I might understand why that is a concern. Maybe my students are relying really heavily on false cognates. Okay, well, it's important for me to stop and realize that that's still a powerful thing. It means that they're really trying to understand the language and they're trying to apply patterns. I need to kind of pull that out and go, well, here's what I can model for them in the shared writing process to help them clarify that or help them understand it a little bit better. So we did, Renee has 2 last names, and we really focused in on the being and the doing verbs, which Stephanie then brought into her writing lesson that focused on the being and the doing verbs and made that connection that we see it in the reading, but we can also do it as writers as well. Before we came today, we collected an assortment of student writing from the students in this class, went through that student writing, and just chose a couple learning objectives that would make sense for this group of students. So we chose 3 specific strategies. They were capital letters, so capitalizing proper nouns, sentence starters, sentence beginnings, because students were using a lot of article beginnings or pronoun beginnings. And then the third thing that we did was we focused on verbs, and we did that in order to link it to the reading lesson that they did with Dr. Tebow. So I would say for the assessment, when we think about the show and tell plus processes, I think I mentioned it earlier in our conversation today, but one of the things that I wanted to ensure is that they were going to be successful before I turned them loose to be able to do it independently. So I intentionally planned that we do section for them to be able to ensure that they were successful with both the content and the language, so that I knew that they were ready to be able to move forward in their independent work of the identifying the verbs and the different feelings that those characters were having. We're going to think about what verbs the author is using. We're going to think about, are they showing or telling? And we're going to think about action verbs and being verbs. But this time, we're going to go back into our story. Renee has 2 last names. And I know I love that story. And I pulled out some pieces of that story that we're going to look at today. Okay? And we're going to look at those verbs to see how those verbs are helping us identify the feelings that character is having. Mama frowned and said, "That's too bad." Okay, so the first thing I need to do is what? What do I need to do first? Keegan?
Circle the verb.
Circle the verb. Okay, so let's read it one more time and think about the verbs now. Mama frowned and said, "That's too bad." So we had a graphic organizer called Show and Tell Plus Processes, where they identified the verb. After they identified the verb, they thought about if it was a doing verb or a being verb, and then they thought about if the author was showing or telling them the character's feelings, and then they actually identified the character's feelings. And when we went through that process, I did a model of it. They did one together, so I knew that they were successful. That was kind of like a formative assessment. Okay, you guys are ready to go. And then they did one independently. If frowned is a doing verb, give me a number 1. And if frown is a being verb, give me a number 2. Wow, I see all number 1s. And I agree, it's a doing verb. If we go back to our anchor chart over here, we can see frowned is on our action verbs. It's something we can actually do. Show me a frown, all of you. Good, good, good. It's something we can do, right? Our lips actually turn down when we frown. Okay, now, is it showing or telling? Give me a 1 with your hands if you think it's showing, and give me a 2 with your hands if you think it's telling. Frowned, is the author showing or telling? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, good, good. Oh, I see all 1s. So we know that we are showing, right? The author is showing us. The author is not telling us how this character is feeling. The author's showing us through this verb. Okay. I want you now to talk with your partner. I think this character is feeling blank because blank. Ready? Begin talking to your partner, please.
I think this character is feeling sad because he is frowning.
Good. Good. Okay, Corwin, tell us what you think.
I think you are, the character is feeling sad because, she was frowning.
She was frowning. So that action verb told you how she was feeling, right? Do you guys agree? If you agree, give them a thumb up. Oh, I'm sorry, do this. Perfect. All right. Sad. You are absolutely right. Okay. Now, you are going to do with your partner number 4 and number 5. And you're going to follow that same process. But you can't do it by yourself. I want you to talk with your partner about what the verb is. Talk with your partner about if it's a doing or being verb, if it's showing or telling, and feeling. Ready? Begin.
And students need that processing time. So even when you were working with the show and tell processes in small groups over here, students would often share with one another first, kind of confirm their answers and make sure they were on the right track, and then share out with the group. That was ensuring that every single student at your table was thinking the entire time and participating the entire time. With the shared writing or the dictato, every single student is writing every single sentence and participating, and then going back and making those changes. Where were my mistakes? And that really ensures that that all of our students are gaining the strategies that they need to be successful readers and writers, and we're building in those scaffolds to help them be successful. So things to think about when we're writing, we want to think about how we're starting our sentences, and I challenge you in your own writing to challenge yourself and try starting with a when phrase or starting with a verb and kind of taking it from there and trying to kind of create more creative sentences. Also, as writers, we can tell how someone's feeling, or if we really want to be creative, we can show how someone's feeling, okay? That's something that a writer can do to make their writing more interesting. And then we always want to remember our capital letters, all right? Do you guys have any questions about our writing today? And this was a great example of assessing language because we were building language and content together, language and content in tandem. This gave Melissa the opportunity to look at, are they able to identify the verb that they need? Do they understand what that verb is? Is it a telling? Is it telling? Is it showing? Is it an action? Is it a being verb? And so by doing that, it really demonstrates just how you can use kind of that formal or that formative assessment to guide your lesson.
Yeah, and I think you used it in your planning. So you used the formative assessment in your planning. So Stephanie collected all of the writing samples and then really determined what were the needs of the students, and that's how she was going to plan that lesson. So based on what she saw in terms of that formative assessment, she was going to ensure that that was her teaching points for her lesson.
Yeah, and I think what happens as teachers is we gather these assessments or we collect them, and then we're not quite sure what to do with them. Well, what do I do next? Well, the dictato is a great example of what you do next. I collect my students' assignments, or based on my observations of their writing patterns, I notice, gosh, these are the problems that are coming up over and over and over again, and every time I tell them to fix this, it's not being fixed. Well, the dictato is a way of using or utilizing shared writing to make those changes. It's a way of increasing my students' writing skills based on what they're currently doing, and so using those previous assessments.